Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures Weekly Chart Analysis for the week ending 23rd of February 2024. First chart is the US Dollar Index Futures, as usual. It's always an important chart, especially to the associated markets. This is the most important line at the moment, pretty much at the 104 level, and you can see how price has been respecting this level over the past 3 weeks. Price pushed up to it, but closed back at it. It tried to push through here, but was forced back down. And this week, the market's effectively tested for supply, maybe even a mini shakeout here, and then has responded positively and closed back at it on reduced volume, which shows that selling pressure was relatively low this week. This has been an important line on the chart for some time. Some people would call it an axis line, and you can see how the market has found support here, pushed higher, and then was respected here. This is where price pulled back to. Price pushed up, but then failed. There was an extra test for supply here before price pushed through. It was respected here, and now the market's having a bit of trouble here again. This may cause price to fail here eventually, but at this point in time, it remains stronger than weaker. Price has dipped lower this week and could have broken down, but it didn't break down. It responded and pushed back up to close above mid-bar and back at this important level. So give it the benefit of the doubt at this point. The low volume this week suggests that selling pressure was low and the market is in good position to push higher in response. And that would put the other associated markets under some pressure. This week, with price dipping lower and recovering, allowed some of those other markets just to push higher in response, which you'll see as we go through. E-mini S&P, this is S&P 500 index futures, and this market has been really strong for quite some time now. Last week, the previous week, price pulled back in a bit of an elongated looking test for supply. It was a test for supply, but there was some absorption needed to be done there at the same time. And that can be seen in the wider spread than might be considered ideal for a test for supply and the increased volume. But overall, it did look relatively positive. Price closed back near its high. This week saw an intra-week test for supply here. This is the overlapping part of the bar below the previous close. And then in response, prices pushed higher. And I suggest that's because selling pressure was low, and that can be seen in the lower volume this week. So the path of least resistance was found to be towards the upside, and that allowed the market to push higher in response. And that suggests that the market will probably continue higher while the path of least resistance is towards the upside. Now, it was a little easier for the market this week with the US dollar pulling back a little bit, and that took the pressure off the market and allowed it to push higher as well. So if the US dollar does attempt to push higher this week, this market may test for supply a second time, or at least do so early in the week prior to any real serious attempt to push higher. US Treasury 10-year note futures have been relatively strong more recently, but broke down last week and saw buying support arrive this week, possibly due to the US dollar index futures moving lower, at least initially. Volume was very high this week, but there's no doubt there's an attempt being made here to support the market, and probably being supported adjacent to this level here where support came in previously, and it's sort of around the 110 level. So there's been an attempt to support the market. Whether it will eventually be successful, I'm not sure. The amount of volume suggests that it was a pretty serious attempt, so you may even see price try to move up to the next level in response, but it may fail, especially if the US dollar continues higher. So a lot of ifs and buts there, but there's definitely been buying support emerge this week, and the volume suggests it was pretty decent support. Copper price futures. Copper price futures saw buying support emerge last week. We looked at it pretty carefully last week, and it suggested this was the case. They're the most important levels on the chart. Now, the buying support could be seen on these two bars here, and the volume was pretty good here. And the up bar this week pretty much confirms that buying support of last week, but it also shows the market really wasn't intent on moving higher. Volume was pretty high again, spread reduced, it was quite narrow in response. It was an up bar probably because all the sellers were taken out on these two bars. As price dipped lower, they were taken out, and then as price recovered and pushed back higher again, anyone who was in the offer was taken out as price accelerated higher. That left a little supply vacuum in the market, and price has pushed higher in response, but not with any great intent. So almost certainly high volume, narrow spread up bar will see some sort of testing for supply in response next week, at least early on. And if supply was found to be low, yeah, maybe there'll be an attempt to push up to the highs of the range. But if supply is drawn out, you might find that price actually dips lower next week and closes perhaps within the range of this bar. Gold price futures. Gold price futures have looked pretty good recently. You had this 3-bar reversal here, or shakeout, a nice strong response to it, a test of it, and then an acceleration higher. And more recently, this bar here saw pretty serious buying support emerge, and the up bar in response confirmed it. There was a pull back on low volume to suggest that selling pressure was low, and then last week was a shakeout, a little mini shakeout. And this week, the positive response to that mini shakeout shows the buying support that did emerge at that level. It confirms it to some degree. So this is all making good sense, and I think the market's getting wound up for a push higher. It's just waiting for the timing to be right, for trading conditions to become favourable, and when they do, I think the market will attempt to move higher. Selling pressure was relatively low this week, and that allowed price to push up, as did the weakness in the US dollar. So everything looks pretty good there. Silver price futures have been a bit messy lately. The chart's messy. Last week saw a big push higher with a wide spread, and that will obviously need some testing for supply and some consolidation in response. And that's pretty much exactly what the market's done. It's consolidating at this level. Volume is still pretty high. Activity's high in this market. But overall, the important thing is the market's attempting to consolidate in the top half of this bar. If it can do so, the market is relatively strong. If it has to pull back deeper before it can absorb any supply that's been drawn out from the gains in this bar, it would suggest the market is slightly weaker. But if it can consolidate in the top half of this bar and then respond positively, it's an indication this market really is showing underlying strength. So use that as your judgment. Light crude price futures were kind of attempting to break out. And this week the market has pulled back a little bit, mostly on Friday and mostly on reduced volumes. So selling pressure isn't really strong, but the market has pulled back, and you may find an attempt to consolidate right on this 75 line. You might see market pull back a little bit this week and then hang at this 75 line. I'm drawing in like daily bars. Early in the week, a pull back, and then a little mini shakeout, and then you might find little consolidation bars like this next week. around the 75. If the market does reverse completely, let's just get rid of that. If the market did reverse completely and push higher like this next week, that would be relatively strong and would suggest the market is preparing to break out. Although at the moment, you can only say that this was a grinding sort of a breakout. It doesn't really look like a really strong push higher like this. Anyway, it remains to be seen. The relatively narrow spread on the down bar this week suggests the market is relatively strong. So we'll see. This is a Euro US dollar currency futures, and the market pushed higher this week. Perhaps not a convincing push higher. Closed well off its high, about mid-bar. It's probably more a technical push higher in response to the US dollar moving lower this week, rather than a fundamentally strong push higher in this market individually. So it was a push higher. It was a little bit of a weak or tentative push higher. And the volume was almost about average, so it was genuine volume. I'm suggesting that this is showing you that this market isn't underlying strong. This market is responding more to the US dollar. British pound currency futures are trading a little stronger than the euro. You can see the market has pushed higher this week and closed up closer to its high than its low. Volume was average, where the euro was slightly below average. And this market hasn't really dipped down to the next level lower like the euro did. This market never actually quite reached this level. And this market is definitely looking a little stronger than the euro. Not massively stronger, but stronger all the same. Aussie dollar currency futures. You can see where the breakdown lines were. Support came in here, adjacent to this. They're the important levels. And the market did push higher this week. It was a bit of a tentative push higher, a bit like the euro, on low volume, which suggests that it probably wasn't a fundamentally strong push higher. It was a technical push higher in response to the weakness on the US dollar, perhaps as much or more than anything fundamental in this actual market. So it was a push higher, a bit of a tentative push higher, and I would like to be seeing a bit more underlying strength if this market actually is strong and not just responding to the US dollar. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin futures have been doing a good job lately. This was the important zone that price had to move through. It was always likely to be some supply drawn out from the left here. You can see the market initially pushed in with some absorption, a gap up here, then an acceleration to the highs, an attempt to consolidate. Supply was drawn out and the market pulled back in response. And then after a little period of absorption, price accelerated higher over 2 weeks. And this week, the market's making a pretty good effort at consolidating right up high in the range. This is a sign of strength if it's able to complete this consolidation up here. This is the market absorbing the supply drawn out when the market makes strong gains in a relatively short period of time. And you can see the volume was pretty high, so there was supply drawn out. The supply would be coming from stale supply from the left, profit takers who bought down lower, and short sellers who think the market is going to push down, maybe not break down, but it's going to push down from its initial high. And they can make a little short-term gain. So the market's consolidating, the relatively narrow spread and the consolidation right up high in this range suggests the market is underlying strong. So See if it can complete it. It may have more to go. You may see a little mini shakeout like this next week. That would make sense. But at this point in time, supply is being drawn out. You can see that in the volume, but the market's making a pretty good attempt to absorb it. It's looking pretty comfortable, actually. So let's just see how it goes. At this point in time, it's consolidating those gains of 2 weeks ago and doing a pretty good job of it. Back to the US dollar index futures just quickly. Put in that important line at 104. It's being respected really strongly, which is always a sign of confidence in the market. You can actually see what's going on and understand why it's happening. The market does look stronger than weaker here, and you would expect the market will at least attempt to push higher in response after it pushed up to this level. It's tested it twice. It's tried to move away here, then pulled back, pushed back up to it, pulled back again this week, and then recovered. There's a lot of work going on at this level. If it fails, it's really going to pull back to the 102 level. But I'm anticipating the market is going to make an attempt to push higher here, and that'll put some of these other markets under pressure. And as I've said a few times more recently, when the US dollar index futures are moving higher, those markets who don't break down in response and try to absorb the strength in the US dollar are the underlying strong markets. They're the markets you want to follow if you're looking to go long. So keep an eye out for those markets that attempt to absorb the strength in the US dollar. Okay, that's a lot for now. Thanks for your time. We're back again next week. Thank you. See ya.